Hey everyone, Zach here with Zen Construction bringing you another remodel video. In this video, I'm going to show you each and every step that I took to take this bathroom that was completely original to the house. The only update that was made was the toilet, and turn it into this beautiful, luxurious bathroom here. I'm going to go through and pull out the bathtub, all new vanity, new paint, trim. But the main piece of this project was expanding on the bathroom size. So this closet right here runs the length of the bathroom and is a little bit awkward and wasn't used very much by the homeowner, so they felt that they'd rather have a large bathroom to leave enough room for a big walk-in shower than have that closet. So that will be one of the main steps in the process. There's another look at the closet here. We are going to be pulling off all that tile. I'm going to be very strategic about what drywall we do pull off and reuse some of it. But of course, we will be adding all new green board or cement board in its place. So one of the first steps in any good remodel project is demolition. So because I wanted to reuse some of the drywall, I was very careful about how I pulled out this vanity, as well as didn't want to cause any damage to any of the plumbing fixtures. Like I mentioned earlier, that toilet was updated somewhat recently, so we are going to reuse that toilet. When removing a nice big portion of tile, I've always found it's easier just to score around the drywall and exactly where you want it to go, and then you can actually pull the tile chunk off all in one piece. Do keep in mind it is going to be quite heavy, and if you do need to break it in half or a couple smaller chunks so you can carry it, that's probably a really good idea. But everything came out pretty easy. I did decide to go with pulling out that wall first and work my way around as opposed to going the opposite way with all that tile. There was a light switch that came down through this wall, so I was very careful not to damage that in any way. And fortunately for me, it is on a separate circuit, so I was able to turn off any power to that completely while still having light in the bathroom. Once I got that wall removed, I kept on going, working my way around, and come to find there was actually a pretty large space on the right side right there, which comes in handy a lot later. So after pulling the tub out, of course, I found a big blob of mortar underneath the bathtub. It is very common practice to do this, and I end up doing that as well, but we will have to chip that out later. So of course, I went and got the jackhammer to remove all of the old floor tile. Having the jackhammer made really quick work of this. I did try doing it with a hammer and a crowbar, and it just was taking way too long. So the jackhammer was a savior in this aspect of the project. Getting all those chunks cleaned up. And here's what I was talking about before with that big mortar bed that goes underneath the bathtub. Just had to go through and break up as much of it as I could, get everything as flat and level as I could. And I went through and did a little bit of extra cleanup with all the mortar. One big piece of this project too, in order to have enough room for a nice big walk-in shower, is we wanted to move the toilet to the left about 6 inches. So all I did was uncover where that plumbing pipe was, find out where it ties into the main drain line, and then added a slight elbow, a 22.5 degree elbow, with a little bit of an extended 3-inch ABS pipe. And just by adding those two little pieces, I was able to move the toilet flange over just exactly where we wanted it to go. This does have a little bit less room for the vanity, but we ended up choosing a single sink vanity instead of a double, so the spacing actually works out great. I need to do a little bit of plumbing adjustment as well over where the bathtub used to be. I wanted to move the drain away from the wall as much as I could, but also needed to sink it down a little bit because bathtub drain is a little bit higher than the surface. So I had to make some fine-tune adjustments here. And after everything was cut to size and looked good and where I wanted it, I went back with some ABS glue, permanently fixed all of those drain lines in place, including the toilet flange you can see right here. And after those were all set, I backfilled in as much as I could, leaving plenty of room for a nice thick concrete patch, and then went over with a concrete mix. I did use a fast drying concrete mix, and I wasn't too worried about the finish. I did make it as flat as I possibly could, but it is all going to be covered, so I wasn't too worried about what it looked like. Getting everything cleaned up for the next step in the process. So after all of the drain lines were ready to go, the next step was to start building the framing for the walk-in shower. So I added a dividing wall right here, adding tons of support so it was very stable, didn't rock or wobble at all. Tied into the joists, added a ton of anchors into the concrete. You can also see that I used my laser to make sure everything was lined up and square, and both the dividing walls on either side of the walkway were perfectly square to one another. Again, adding a little bit more support for that wall. As you can see, that little room that I was talking about back there came in handy, that being able to get back there for certain aspects of the job. So on this side, the homeowner asked if we could do a shower bench, which I thought was a great idea. There's plenty of space, so putting a bench right here is going to be a great use of that space. Of course, when building any surface that is going to have water near it, you need to make sure that it is sloped. You do not want to have any perfectly flat surfaces where water can just sit and stand, because that can cause issues down the road. So any flat surface, including on top of the walls, the benches, of course the shower floor, and then the curb, those are all going to be sloped a little bit. The rule of thumb is a 1/4 inch per foot of travel anywhere that you can go, and that's true across the board in plumbing, drainage, shower, tile, even the bottoms of the shampoo niches that I'm framing in right here. They will all get a slight slope. So getting those shampoo niches installed, I just pre-built them and then screwed them in between the studs. That seemed to work out really well. So the next is adding the lights over the top of the shower. Again, I just used the same circuit that was in the closet lighting before. Just fish the wire through from the switch, adding 2 of those lights up through the top. There was some joists that were in the way that was actually running perpendicular to the direction of the lights. So I just had to get a nice long drill bit and work my way through those joists, and then get some fish tape and fish the wire through. It's a little bit tedious, but it ended up working out just fine. The lights that I end up using for this project are a great product that I will end up using significantly more in remodel projects down the road. And they actually don't use a can. They actually attach to the drywall, and the box that everything is wired into is a completely separate piece that can just be floating up inside the drywall in between the joists. So everything is wired in, and then the light actually clips onto the sides of the drywall. Here I am getting everything nice and stapled in. But with those lights, they work significantly better. I think the install is way easier. And the coolest part is you can actually adjust the color temperature to fit your house. So both the homeowner and I were very excited about that. We felt like we could make those adjustments later down the road. And again, with the ease of install, of course that does come with a little bit of a higher price tag, but the features that come along with it are well worth it, in my opinion. So after all the electrical is buttoned up, I need to go through and make some adjustments to the plumbing. So pulled off that drywall there. And since there was 2 sinks before and we're gonna be putting in a single sink, I just had to cap off some of those drain lines and water lines, and then move the sink line over just a little bit, make room for that single sink. We also are doing all new shower faucet handle valves, so all that was gonna be updated as well. Course, using all PEX products, shark bite products, super great for installation, any plumbing, in my opinion. The install went very well, went nice and smooth. You could tie into copper, PVC, anything. Went very smooth. So after all of that plumbing was buttoned up, I was getting ready to put the drywall back on. So I went through and added a blocking in a bunch of different places so that I could have good adhesion and plenty of places to screw in the new drywall to. Any drywall that I replaced, I used the mold resistant green board. There wasn't very much that I needed, so I just bought 2 full sheets of that and ended up having plenty of extra. Worked out great. So you can see I'm kind of going through and scoring some of the old drywall, making sure that I'm gonna have a nice solid seam. Everything is gonna get mudded and taped, of course, but the less gaps that you have early on, the easier that makes your life down the road. So after all of that drywall was put in and secured, just going through and taping those joints. This is very small little space, so I ended up using a quick drying mud for each step in the process, just to allow a little bit more efficiency when doing the mudding and taping. This was a multiple room remodel or a big basement or something, just a standard all-purpose mud or taping mud does work great, and just of course it does take a little bit longer to dry. Since there was only a couple spots and I was really hopeful to get multiple coats in one day, I did end up going with the fast drying mud, and overall I think it worked out really well. So just make sure when you are doing some tape, you put plenty of mud along the seam, put your tape over the top, and then squish out as much of that mud as you can, but also making sure that you have plenty of coverage underneath that tape. So getting all of those buttoned up. Even where I knew that tile was going to be over, I still wanted to add some mud in there just so we could have a nice flat surface for the tile to sit. After the first coat was nice and thick, I did go back and knock some of those edges down. Although I ended up doing 4 coats total, 1 tape coat and 3 top coats. I sanded lightly between each one. I also went through between the coats and did some sponging with a little bit of a damp sponge just to get off any of that excess dust. So here I am going through, adding yet another coat of that top coat. The drywall work that was done previously was done fairly well, so I wanted to ensure that everything looked cohesive and matched. There was also some spots where the old shelving was, and that was in the closet, that left a couple holes and dings and dents, and also when I scraped off some of the caulk lines, a little bit of that surface came with it, so I wanted to make sure to go through and patch that up. Also, when I was sanding, I was making sure to knock down any of the previous texture so that I could feather out these new pieces of wall as much as possible. I am going to eventually go through and retexture the entire room so that everything does match and look really nice. So one of the creative parts of remodeling a bathroom is dry time. So while the mud was drying on the walls, I felt like it was a great opportunity to start working on the concrete shower pan. So in order to make sure that there was really good adhesion between the concrete shower pan and the concrete slab that was supporting the rest of the house, I used a layer of thin set. That was what the white thin set was there, and so I trowel that in and then pack the dry pack over the top of that to make sure that there's a good bond. And then after the pre-slope was all sloped, again with that 1/4 inch per foot, I go through and add the pan liner. Because I have all those blocking around the perimeter of the shower pan, it makes the pan liner install go nice and quick. I did use a 3-piece drain that was glued in to the pan liner and also the bracket underneath. This makes for a great seal, great bond. I did use my laser to go through and mark a level line just to make it a little bit easier when I do end up doing the final dry pack mud. So when you're doing a 1/4 inch per foot, that goes for the longest distance. So I measured from the longest distance into the corner and did my 1/4 inch per foot, and then did a nice level line all the way around matching that same distance. So even the long sides do have that plenty of slope. And then when you're putting in the dry pack mud, just use a screed and a level. Just take it nice and easy, plenty of time. It's way more important that this is flat and true and sloped properly. So again, going back and forth with different mud products, using the dry time efficiently as possible. I want to say that this is the final coat of mud that is feathered out to add a nice flat surface. So after the shower pan was all done, the next step was going through and adding the cement board. So I know there's tons of different ways to do showers. This method I use might be a little bit slower than some of the newer methods out there, but this is the one that I've been taught and I've been using for years now, and it's tried and true. Never had any issues. I am interested in learning about some of those new shower systems that everyone's talking about, but in this project I just decided to stick with what I know. So going through, wrapping up anywhere that's going to have tile underneath it is going to get cement board within the shower, putting inside those shower niches. And then after all the cement board was installed, I go through with a mesh tape and cover all the joints and seams. After all the mesh tape is in, you go back with a fast drying mud compound, and that mesh tape allows for the mud to hold and stick and gives it a place to stay. Here I am adding all that now. So any joint or seam is going to get a nice thick coat of mud just to make it a solid surface, waterproof plane. This will be getting a waterproof paintable membrane over the top of it, but anytime you can make it flat and level underneath is what you want to do. So I waited to the last second to pull off the light fixture, come to find out that the junction box or the light box was way off. So of course that added a bunch more work for me, but it was not that big a deal. I ended up doing it off camera real quick, just added a little bit more drywall work. So going through, getting everything removed and masked off, prepping for the first coat of texture now that all of the seams have been taped and mudded and filled. Also didn't feel like I wanted to get a bunch of texture all over the shower because I'm going to be applying a waterproof membrane over that, and so I figured if I can, might as well avoid getting orange peel texture spray all over the shower. So I have a cheap Home Depot texture sprayer that for these small types of job actually work just fine. For this application it actually worked great. One of the things I do when I am applying texture over finishes that are already done, like a pre-painted wall, for example, in this case, is I actually dump a little bit of an all-purpose primer into the texture mud just to give it a little bit more adhesion and let it stick a little bit better. So after all of the texture was done, I started the process of waterproofing. So again, I've mentioned this in a couple other videos. There are several different ways to go about waterproofing a shower properly. There are tons of videos all over YouTube that show you all those steps. This process that I went with was using a paintable membrane, Red Guard in this case. There's tons of other products that are very, very similar. I also used a fiberglass mesh to add even more protection in the seams and corners. So paint on a thick layer of the paintable membrane, press in the fiberglass mesh, very similar to like a paper mache or something. Press that in there and then go back over that again and just completely encapsulate that fiberglass with the waterproof membrane. As you can see, I'm going through all around the bench, in the shampoo niches, anywhere that two seams meet together in a corner, and then all of the rest of the surfaces will actually get rolled on, so painted. All of the corners and the places with the mesh will get 3 coats, and the main surfaces will actually get 2 coats rolled on. Here I am applying the second coat, and this all gets completely wrapped all the way around from the floor to basically as high as you want to go. I mean, there's no way water's going to get up that high, but just add a little bit of peace of mind. So the homeowner elected to have a pebble shower floor, which is very popular nowadays. So I'm going through laying that out. I've done pebble floors in some other videos, and the goal with these is try to make as little of cuts as possible, make it look like it's just meant to be that way. All the pieces are as large as possible. I did go through with a thin set and raise the floor up a little bit. There was some confusion on how thick the pebble floor was, or the pebble tile was, and it was actually a lot thinner than we had originally anticipated. So I had to raise the floor up a little bit with some thin set and to make sure that the drain would drain properly. So that's where you saw that white layer down there first. So actually, one of the things that I do is completely finish the floor before any of the tile, and so that I can actually rest the wall tile on top of the finished floor, so that as water drains down the wall, it will just hit the floor and drain into the center of the floor, into the drain. So as opposed to putting the floor in last, where water can seep down in between that grout line, I just elect to do the floor first. It does add an extra step, and also there's some masking involved, but in my mind it makes a lot more sense to have the water run from the wall to the floor first. As you can see, I put some cardboard down to keep that safe while the rest of the tile process goes on. So again, I mentioned it in several of my other videos, but I elected to use a laser again to keep everything nice and straight, all the grout lines. And I'm using a nice big 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch square notch trowel to apply these wall tiles. They are 12 by 24, of course back buttering every single one. I really did a lot of work to try to prepare to have these shower niches line up perfectly with the grout lines. Of course, with a little bit of extra measuring and time to prepare for all that, it worked out really well. These shampoo niches and all of the half walls are actually going to be getting an aluminum corner trim. So I have a little bit of wiggle room there, but the precision at the end is very, very important. So after that was all lined up and perfect, I continued on. I do like to do the back wall first, just to make sure that that's where your starting point is. That's obviously where your eye gathers and everything. The shower niches were super important, so I wanted to make sure I got those done first. And then when the grout lines, will make sure to wrap all the way around the shower, but I knew that I didn't have any freedom of movement as far as moving up and down because of those shower niches. So I elected to do as much as I could on the back first before starting on the sides of the shower. Of course, using a tile leveling system. Since this video, I actually found a new system that I like significantly more. I'll actually be sure to leave that and several other tools and things that I like to use down in the description. So once the back wall was up to where there was about one row left on the top, I started doing the side. Again, utilizing the laser to make sure that the grout lines are wrapped all the way around and nice and straight. Having a good level shower floor does make a huge difference in this process. There are several different ways to do it. In other videos, I actually have used blocking before to do the second row first and then come back and then apply the first row afterwards so that I can have custom heights. But if at all possible, I like to make the shower floor as level as possible to then be able to have my first row actually sit on that floor, of course with some 1/8 inch spacers. So one of the things that the homeowner really got creative about was their tile selection. So they have several different colors and finishes, and they're very excited about the different shades and transitions that they were going to have. And of course, I wanted to do my best to make those look as good as possible. They went with a little bit of a beveled subway tile on the outsides of the walls with the same mosaic that goes in the back of the shampoo niches along the bottom. Again, like I mentioned earlier, all of these corners are going to have aluminum corner trim to have a good transition between different tile pieces. And of course, I think it turned out great. With subway tile like this, I find it's a lot easier to pre-cut as many of the tiles as you can. Of course, there's going to be situations where you had to custom cut some of them, but if they're pre-sized and ready to go, it does make the installation go a lot faster, and grout lines do line up significantly more with a little bit of preparation. And the top row was almost perfect, a full piece of tile as far as the 12-inch distance. There was a couple spots that I had to make some adjustments, but it was so minimal that you could barely even tell. So I was pretty excited about that. From the shower floor, using a full piece of tile all the way up to the ceiling is full sheets, so there's no thin pieces or weird grout lines or anything like that. So now I'm working on the half wall as long as the curb. That's all one continuous plane. Getting the aluminum corner trim pieces prepped, getting those all thin set in there. And there are several transitions. I mean, these wrap from the top of the wall up to the side of the wall down. There's 3-way corners going through the tops and coming down, and then of course through the shower curb. And again, I mentioned this several times, and I'll probably mention it again, a little bit of prep work in certain situations, like making sure your wall is straight, making sure the cement board is laying flat. All of those types of things do make the next step in the process significantly easier. Again, doing my best to line up grout lines where I can, but also not having excess grout lines in places where I don't really need them. Here, for example, the wall was just a little bit taller than that 24-inch tile, so I had to go with a smaller piece right here. It ended up working out great. The transition as far as those corners looks seamless once it's all finished up. Of course, using tile leveling system anywhere that I can. Now doing the top of the wall. Of course, this section right here that I'm working on, as well as the curb and the other little section of the half wall and the bench itself, and even the shower niches, all of those do have a slight slope so that water can run off back in towards the shower, towards the drain. The homeowner elected not to have a glass shower at this point. They felt it was big enough that they could just have a nice open concept walk-in shower, so there is no nothing keeping the water in. So of course wanted to make sure that everything was sloped. Going through and getting some of the last sections wrapped up. One of the things, the tiling leveling system does work great, but in some situations using a little bit of blue painter's tape is really helpful. Now I'm going through and I'm actually priming that trim. They wanted to paint it white, and so going through and painting some of those areas. Then after the first coat of primer was on, I started laying out the floor. I wanted to do the floor first in this case so that I could put the baseboard trim on top and have like a nice seamless gap all the way around, or lack thereof a gap. This situation was kind of interesting. If you look closely, there's only like 3 or 4 different patterns of this tile. The homeowner was actually quite disappointed. It showed up and there's just so many duplicates, and so they worked really hard the night before I was going to put the flooring in and actually arranged the entire floor out in their garage exactly how they wanted it. So I was very careful to carry in the pieces in the same order that they had laid them out. Things were turned slightly, and I think it actually turned out great. They did a great job at making it look and appear random, no repeating patterns. So after all of the tile was in, I wanted to go through and start preparing for grout. So putting the grout on, we did use a light gray grout that does work with some of the other furniture that's going to go in here, as well as work with all the different colors of the tile. I really encourage them to try to pick a grout color that we could just have one that is used throughout the entire bathroom. I feel like, especially when you start getting several different colors of tile incorporated in a bathroom, if you could have one aspect of that color be cohesive, it does help a lot with the overall look. And so picking a light gray grout with all of these different colors of tile ended up working out great. Going through and getting all that pressed in there. Grouting can go pretty quick. Again, like I said many times, a little bit of preparation before doing the grout process. So getting all the thin set cleaned out, making sure there's no excess thin set squeezing between the cracks or even on the surfaces of the tile, does make this process go significantly quicker. And just like the old expression, paint yourself in the corner, don't grout yourself into a corner either. So plan ahead a little bit, make sure that your last section of grout is by the door, especially when you're planning on doing it all in one step. So now that the grout is all dried and cleaned up, and start getting the furniture moved in. So the vanity that they had actually purchased was the way that it was set up originally, the drawer could not open because it was too close to the wall and it would have hit the trim. And so I called the homeowner in and said, okay, this is the situation, and they elected just to move it away from the wall slightly. So they were not worried about that at all. They had kind of anticipated that anyways, so there is going to be a little gap on the left side of the vanity. Again, like I said, they were not worried about that at all. So now that all the baseboard is laid and caulked, I'm going to go through and start painting now. So of course I wanted to mask off all the tile so I didn't get any paint on that. I did run out of plastic, so I got creative and used some garbage bags and different things like that. I did go with using an airless sprayer. Wherever I can, I do elect to spray if possible. I just think it is so much more of a consistent finish. It lays a lot of paint on there. If necessary, you can go through and back roll, but the overall look is so much better, especially with trim and even doors and things like that. If possible, I will try to paint and spray the trim and doors with the semi-gloss white in most cases. Also, to save some time, I did go with cutting in by hand the gray so that I could paint all of it on the same day. I did allow a couple hours for the white ceiling and the trim to set up a little bit before I went back through and cut everything in by hand. Now that everything was all painted, I could start getting rid of all the masking. Really coming in the home stretch now, getting really excited. With this project, there's tons of issues with ordering materials and things like that, but it ended up working out great. The homeowner was very understanding, very flexible about different situations, so I was very happy to get this one finished up. It did take a little bit longer than expected, but sometimes that is the case with renovation projects. We're going through now and just getting everything installed. Got that new light fixture installed, getting the vanity hooked up, countertop in, plumbing, drain, all of that hooked up. You can see there's the little gap that I was mentioning before. Now we're going through and putting the original toilet that I had taken out back in. Like I mentioned, this toilet was new. They had recently purchased it, and so of course there was nothing wrong with it, so we put it back in. Of course, getting new wax rings and new fittings and new valves, those things. So going through and getting the countertop all caulked in and sealed around the edges, getting the handles and everything put on. And then in certain situations like that mirror, I actually brought the homeowner in, and we could have had it sideways, horizontal or vertical. So I actually brought her in and said, okay, exactly which way do you want this? So there was no confusion, and I didn't mess it up. So we decided which the best way was to go. So now that all the grout is all dry and I've made sure to buff all of the haze and everything off, I'm starting to go through and get the plumbing, the shower fixtures on, going through and wiping everything down. Again, it looks like. So now after the grout and everything is dry, I do like to go through and silicone caulk all of the seams one last time. Of course, I get a sanded silicone caulk that matches the same color as the grout. So anywhere where there's a transition or a seam, I like to go through, and once everything dries, you can't really even differentiate between the grout and the caulk, but it does add a little bit of more waterproof water direction. Now I'm going in and hanging up the towel bars. You can see there's a nice big storage cabinet that we had brought in also. Of course, getting the finishing touches, the fan cover. That's actually where the old light switch came down, so of course I had to make sure that became a junction box that was accessible, and then put a access panel over the top of that. So now I'm going through, now that everything has been caulked, I'm going through with a grout sealer, so it's an impregnator. I like to do it over the top of the silicone. I figure an extra layer of protection over everything cannot hurt. So just going through and wiping all of that on over all of the grout seams, and so here are some final pictures. It's exactly what the homeowner was looking for. Of course, everything looks straight and seamless, and all the grout lines match up. All of the different colors of tile turned out great. The homeowner was very excited, and it has been several months now since I've finished this up, and I've actually heard that they elect to shower in this bathroom and use this one more often than the one that is actually attached to their bedroom, which makes me feel great that they're so excited about it that they actually go to a different section of the house in order to shower and use the restroom. So but I have to give it to the homeowner picking all of these colors and tiles. I was a little apprehensive, to be honest, with all of the different things they had going on, but once it all came together, especially with the cohesiveness of the grout, I think it turned out awesome. So thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If it is your first time watching these videos, I really appreciate it if you smash that subscribe button. I post as often as I can all of these videos. Of course, with all of the craziness that's happening in the world right now, there was a little bit of a lull there, but we're back in the swing of things, thankfully. So again, really appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.